A voice of noise from the city, a voice from the temple, a voice of the Lord that rendereth recompense to his enemies. Before she travailed, she brought forth. Before her pain came, she was delivered of a man-child. Who hath heard such a thing? Who hath seen such things? Shall the earth be made to bring forth in one day? Or shall a nation be born at once? For as soon as Zion travailed, she brought forth her children. Shall I bring birth? Shall I bring to the birth, and not cause to bring forth, saith the Lord? Shall I cause to bring forth, and shut the womb, saith thy God? Anybody remembers? Who was the first character we posted on Monday on the theme of travail? Hannah, okay. And with Hannah's story, so the 3 reflective questions that I posted concerning Hannah was, how does Hannah's honest and heartbroken prayer challenge the way we approach God in our own seasons of pain and waiting? As we see, Hannah poured out her soul in travail. This was not perfectly, but she did so honestly. And what does this teach us about the kind of prayers God listens to? Does God listen to the type of prayers that stems from just our minds, when a situation looks bad and we're just like blasting out everything that's in our minds? You think God listens to those type of prayers? Or rather, God listens to the inward groanings, the deep sufferings of our heart? So that's just one thing to think about. The second question that I posted regarding Hannah was, what does Hannah's story teach us about enduring ridicule and disappointment while holding on to faith? Even as Peninnah mocked Hannah, Hannah returned to the tabernacle year after year. Hannah could have easily been discouraged, sharing her household with another, your husband's wife, and being ridiculed each day and night for not having a child. That could have easily discouraged Hannah. And with that discouragement, she could have felt like not the need to go to the tabernacle each year, because she could have been thinking, oh, God doesn't listen to my prayers. I've been praying and crying out for a child day after day. And yet this woman who probably doesn't follow God as I do is getting all the children that she wants. But yet Hannah returned to the tabernacle year after year, consistently praying. Even though she wasn't answered straight away, she had the faith that God will answer her. So what can we learn from her persistence in the face of humiliation and silence? And the last thing about Hannah was, in what ways has your own place of travail, your deep struggle, been a space where something sacred was born? Because I know everybody goes through something. Even Jesus says, in this life you experience many trials and tribulations, but take heart, for I have overcome the world. So in your own place of deep struggle, where has something sacred been born? And this is just something for you to reflect, because it's easy to forget, sometimes how God has really come through for us when life gets busy. There's so many times when I'm reflecting, I'm like, wow, if God has done this, a couple of years back, why can't he do that today? But time after time, because of the busy nature of life, because of work, because of the routines, we tend to forget the times where God showed up previously and think that he can't show up now. So through those deep struggles, even if you're struggling now, remember those times where you've gone through something in the past, where you've really struggled, you've really prayed, you've really been persistent on asking God for something, and he showed up. Something sacred was brought forth in those times. Remember those times now, even when you're going through troubles and hardships. And in Hannah's case, her travail birthed Samuel, and he was one of the greatest, if not one of the greatest prophets and priests of the Old Testament. So what might God be forming in you through your waiting and weeping? So that's Hannah done. I'll move on to my character, which was Joseph. So Joseph is a personal favorite of mine. And I just feel his story is just remarkable. Joseph he was sold by his brothers. He was left in the pit. He was then sold, and then he was thrown into prison. He was even forgotten in prison. All the sad stuff. And then at the end of the day, God really honored him. So now when we come on to the reflective questions about Joseph, the first one is, when life feels unfair and undeserved suffering comes, can you remain quietly consistent and faithful like Joseph, even when it makes no sense? And what it means by quietly consistent, when Joseph went through all of those different troubles, I don't remember seeing in the Bible yet he complained once. He did not complain once. When he was sold by his brothers, did he complain? No. When he was then sold to the Roman official and then he was accused of immorality, did he complain when he was thrown in jail? No. Even when he was forgotten by the chief cupbearer, I don't remember him complaining. And then even after all of that, like, he still remained quietly consistent. He still had faith, knowing that God was doing something through that deep struggles that he was experiencing. So yeah, Joseph did nothing wrong, yet he was betrayed, falsely accused, and forgotten. But what does his consistency in the pit and prison teach us about faith during hardship? The second question was, have you ever seen a gift in your life that once brought trouble eventually become the key to your purpose? And that's a very interesting one, because Joseph's ability to interpret dreams led him to prison, but also positioned him for promotion. How might your current struggle be preparing you for the future purpose? And the last question for Joseph was, what does Joseph's story teach us about the sacredness of delay and the divine purpose in being overlooked? He waited years before his breakthrough came. Yet his travail birthed salvation, not only for himself, not only for his family, but for the whole of Egypt. Imagine, his travail birthed salvation for the whole of Egypt and even the Israelites. What might God be accomplishing in you in your season of waiting? And lastly, we move on to the finale, which was Job. So Job is he's an example of a man that travailed in the midst of adversity. He went through probably every single hardship under the sun, but yet travailed through them. And the first question concerning Job was, how do you respond when life falls apart despite doing everything right? And I don't think there was ever a moment in the Bible where Job did anything wrong, apart from questioning God through his midst of his troubles. But even still, he didn't sin against God. So how do you respond when life falls apart despite doing everything right? Can you still say like Job, though he slay me, yet I will trust him? Job's faith wasn't casual or convenient. It was forged in the fire of loss. What does that level of trust look like in your own life? Can you be able to still say, even through the midst of trials and adversity, even when life is falling apart, even when you're getting hated and slandered, can you still say to, like how Job says, though he slay me, yet I will trust him? You know, that's very deep, right? But that's exactly what Job did. Second reflective question on Job was, what does Job's story teach us about the sacred strength found in not giving up, even when silence or suffering feels unbearable? Job grieved, he questioned, but the main thing was he didn't walk away. And I feel like that's good, because sometimes we human beings, we need to actually process our emotions. We need to process our grief. You know, if we try to bottle it in, I feel like we're doing us more harm than good. You know, when you're going through something and you're like, nah, I can't voice it out or share it, I feel like at the end of the day, that's not going to help with any progress. So I feel like at times it is good to grieve. You know, it is good to feel like you're questioning something. But at the end of the day, just make sure that that doesn't lead you to walking away from your faith. Because God understands everything you're going through. And even through the midst of that, where might God be calling you to stand firm in the midst of confusion and pain? And the last reflective question on Job was, when restoration seems impossible, can you still believe that God is full of compassion and mercy, as James chapter 5 verse 11 declares? Job's ending was greater than his beginning. How does that shape the way you view your own journey through travail? And I think one of my favorite verses is Job chapter 7 verse 8. Though your beginning was small, your latter end will be great. And I feel like that's a testimony to us Christians, that sometimes we may start small, but even through the midst of the smallness, that's where we see God's faithfulness the most. Because when we have everything, you know, we don't go through the struggles, we don't go through the trials, we don't go through the tribulations. It's like, at the end of the day, we don't need God. Where's God in the midst of that? Because everything is, I accomplished it myself. You know, if you're born into a family where, like I say, like you're fed with a golden spoon from day one, and you don't know any hardships, then you're like, oh, everything I accomplish, everything I have is because my family has done that. I don't need to rely on anything else because I got all the money in the world to satisfy me. I don't need to struggle, etc. But when you start off with small and you're really relying on God, just like Joseph, you really see the goodness of God throughout your life, and you really see how how he remains consistent and how he remains faithful through your midst of through the troubles you go through. And one thing I really like to always remember is when you go through like seasons of travailing, when you're going through seasons of pains and agony, how I see it is like gold does not come out as gold as from the sun. Gold needs to be refined. It needs to go through the refiner's fire until it becomes purified, until you see that beautiful, material that we call gold. And it's just like us Christians. Sometimes we need to go through the refiner's fires. God needs to do things in us. God needs to purge us like from some evils or some certain things that we're going through in order to bring out the best version of ourselves. And that's where travailing comes. Because when you travailing day and night, travailing for, I don't know, your family, travailing for maybe certain struggles you're going through the refiner's fire, process by process, like little by, the Bible says line upon line, precept upon precept, a little here, a little there, until you become, right? And that's the whole aim. We want to become in manifestation like Christ. So when we go through the refiner's fire, little by little, step by step, bit by bit, process upon process, we're growing each day until we become in fullness and likeness of Christ himself. So that is, the story of travail through these three characters. And I hope that blessed you in some way.